Hey, welcome back to another Stand on Guard. Goes the question period. We'll be there most of the week if we're not in court. We'll see what happens. But I'm glad to be back. I hope you all had a great Thanksgiving because, of course, we weren't around last week because the House wasn't sitting. But we're back again Monday. I don't know. I can't promise you much in terms of who's going to be there. Justin Trudeau doesn't like the sitting question period. Well, we're just going through the statements by members right now, and as soon as the questions begin, we will join. I just wanted to say a couple of things at the beginning here. We are, as of today, we are going to complete the second 1 million March for Children this Saturday, October 21st, starting at noon at Parliament Hill in Ottawa, at your provincial legislature if you're in Victoria, Edmonton, Winnipeg, a provincial capital, at your local mayor's office if you're in a town or city that is not a provincial capital. But we're going to go through this, and there has been tremendous pressure not to do this because of what's been happening in the Middle East. Now, you know where I stand on this. I'm 100% behind Israel. I always will be, always have been. But we're not going to let terrorist action upset what we can do in Canada. We're not going to allow that to happen because we have to stay focused on domestic policies on which a lot of us are unified and we agree. This has coalesced into a great movement that is an all faith movement of Christians, and I say evangelical Christians, conservative Roman Catholics, mainline Protestants, Jews, Muslims, Sikhs, Hindus, Buddhists. In fact, I understand there's even some atheists in there. But the point is, we've got to fight for the things we agree on and not about things we cannot change. Canada is not going to go to war over Israel, nor should we. The United States shouldn't either. We can support Israel. And if you have friends amongst Palestinians, I understand you're concerned about them as well. I understand there's differences of opinion, but we have got to agree on what's important in terms of this country. And that's to stop gender ideology. That's to stop Trudeau censorship. That's to stop euthanasia. That's to stop abortion on demand. That's to stop everything this Trudeau government is doing to take away your freedom, including trying to put people in prison for freedom of for violating their idea of freedom of assembly, which is any peaceful protest they disagree with. So the freedom trial continues this week. Tamara Leach, Chris Barber, still on trial on ridiculous, trumped up charges. And I'll talk about that more later. But I want to say that we in this country who agree on basics about parental rights, free speech, freedom of assembly, have got to stick together on those issues because we in Canada decide who is elected as prime minister and as members of parliament. We don't have any influence or effect on who is elected in the Middle East. And that's what we have to focus on. Things we can change and the things that affect us directly, things that affect our children. And I stand shoulder to shoulder with my brothers, sisters, friends in this movement. We are united on what we agree with. Nobody agrees on everything, but we agree on so many things that are important right now to save this country from the clutches of the Trudeau government and a very, very bad government it is. And we're going to keep fighting for these things. So let's listen to a while. The question period is going to be starting momentarily, and I'm going to shut up for a while.
Members of the Action Centre and take full advantage of all that it has to offer. I want to thank all of the board of directors and the staff at the Action Centre for the incredible work that they do and the difference they make in the lives of their members. Thank you.
Député de Cowichan, Malahat, Langford.
Today is World Food Day, and we must turn our attention to the food insecurity and hunger that is plaguing our country. We have nothing to celebrate here in Canada. Food bank use is at its highest level in Canadian history, with more working families relying on them just to get by, and every week Canadians are making difficult choices when they visit the grocery store. The food crisis in Canada didn't happen overnight. We got here because it is the natural conclusion of decades of corporate-friendly neoliberal economic policies that both the Liberals and Conservatives have championed.
No, we can stop listening to him for a minute. Anyway, this is the height of hypocrisy, of course. We've got an NDP guy saying that the Conservatives and the Liberals are in political bed together. Who's propping up this Liberal regime? Jagmeet Singh and the NDP. This guy, once again, talking rubbish. The NDP is propping up this government, and he knows it.
Keep your voices quiet because I have a hard time hearing members who are far from me here in the House. The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. Mr. Speaker, if you pay close attention, you'll hear the footsteps of a giant walking towards the stars. Hubert Reeves passed away on Friday at the age of 91. An astrophysicist, as well as an outstanding communicator, Hubert Reeves left his mark on Quebecers as a professor and researcher, but also as a passionate lover of science. In a career spanning from 1960 to the turn of the millennium, Hubert Reeves taught at the most prestigious faculties in Quebec, Europe, and the United States. He advised NASA and headed France's National Center on Scientific Research. He also wrote, notably in the 1980s, with must-reads such as Pesh.
I'll tell you, you never know when question period is going to start anymore. So you're always guessing. I thought I'd waited long enough, but never. I promise some insightful and witty analysis, though, as always. We're back.
Who has gone back to talk to the stars. The Honourable Member for Thornhill.
Hamas's atrocities against Israeli civilians have been unimaginably horrific, and the sadistic crimes continue. In the carnage, 5 Canadians murdered, and they are not just numbers. Alexander Luke from Montreal, Ben Mizrahi of Vancouver, both murdered when Hamas opened fire on a music festival. Sheer Gregory was also killed there. Adi Vital Kaploun of Ottawa was murdered in her kibbutz, and Netta Epstein murdered as he sheltered his girlfriend from a grenade launched at them. They are now in our memory forever, and may their memory be a blessing. Canadian citizens missing are believed to be held hostage amongst the 199 others by Hamas terrorists who hold their own people under siege in the gruesome grip, serving as a proxy for the regime in Iran, imposing maximum terror on everyone in their path of destruction. Amongst the missing, believed to be held Vivian Silver, Judith Weinstein, and Tiferet Lapidot, daughter of our own citizens. Their fate unknown. Canada could do more, and they must do more. Demand their release again and again, and we pray for their fate and their safe return.
The Honourable Member for Winnipeg South Centre.
The tragic loss of life at the hands of Hamas's evil has made us angry, sad, and filled with unimaginable grief as we are left trying to comprehend the incomprehensible. These terror attacks are the cruelest against the Jewish people, my people, since the Holocaust. It is possible to live in a world where we strive for peace in the Middle East, while at the same time being able to state in no uncertain terms that we condemn the rape, murder, and kidnapping of innocent women, children, and the elderly. And we must be able to say this without the word "but" inserted to serve as the catalyst for some moral justification. There is no morality to be found in what they have done. Even the lives of people whose interests Hamas claims to represent mean nothing in their pursuit of hatred and the eradication of the Jewish people. There is no question that we must uphold the value of all human life and extend to one another a sense of kindness and dignity as we struggle together in the days ahead. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Questions orales. L'honorable.
Oral questions, the Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
All right, here we go.
Monsieur le Président, après
Mr. Speaker, after the attacks by Hamas nearly 2 weeks ago, there are Canadians who are still in danger. 4,000 Canadians are looking for help from the federal government to get out of Israel. About 300 Canadians are trying to leave Gaza. And between 40,000 and 70,000 Canadians are in Lebanon. What is the government doing to protect Canadians that are in danger?
L'honorable vice.
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister.
Président, comme c'est la première fois.
Mr. Speaker.
Oh, no, Trudeau.
Since this is the first time we are all in this House since the horrible terrorist attacks by Hamas, allow me to say this. Canada is with the state of Israel and the Israeli people. Canada is at the side of Israel and the people of Israel, and they can count on the continued support of Canada. We demand the immediate liberation of all hostages and unequivocally condemn the terrorist attacks done by Hamas.
L'honorable chef de l'opposition.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
innocent lives, be they Palestinian or Israeli, Jewish, Muslim, or Christian, or otherwise, are all equally precious. Countless of those lives have been lost or put in danger as a direct result of the sadistic attacks of Hamas. And that was the purpose of those attacks, to exact as maximum damage on both Israelis and Palestinians and thwart any attempt for peace. We know that the regime in Iran was behind these attacks. And we know that the most powerful organizer of terrorism in the world is the IRGC, which operates legally in Canada today. Will the government accept the conservative common sense bill to criminalize the IRGC in Canada today?
L'honorable vice premier ministre.
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, this is the first time we are all present in this House since these horrific terrorist attacks by Hamas on the state of Israel and the Israeli people. So I would like to begin by being very clear in English this time. Canada stands with the state of Israel and with the Israeli people. Israel can count on Canada's support. Canada condemns unequivocally Hamas's terrorist attacks, and we call for the immediate release of all hostages.
L'honorable chef de l'opposition.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Last fall, the finance minister promised a balanced budget within 6 years. Last spring, she broke that promise and said that we'd have a balanced budget. Never. And last week, the parliamentary budget officer revealed that her deficit is now 15% bigger than she said it was only 6 months ago. Has the government lost total control of our debt? And how much is this inflationary spending going to add to the interest rates Canadians pay on their mega mortgages?
L'honorable vice premier ministre.
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, our government will be providing an update on our debt and deficit figures and on our revenues in the fall economic statement in due course. When it comes to Canada's fiscal position, let me also be very, very clear. Canadians should listen to the independent ratings agencies whose job it is to evaluate Canada's position and not the partisan talking Canada down attacks of the opposition. Canada's AAA rating has been reaffirmed by ratings agencies since the budget, we are strong fiscally.
L'honorable chef de l'opposition.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Apparently, former Liberal Finance Minister John Manley is just a partisan using talking points when he says that this government's inflationary deficits are like pressing on the inflationary gas pedal and forcing the Bank of Canada to press on the brakes with higher interest rates. Canadian families have the highest debt load of any country in the G7, and those debts are colliding with the rates that this government is driving up. Will the finance minister cancel their inflationary deficits, balance the budget to bring down interest rates and inflation, or will she admit that she's just not worth the cost?
L'honorable vice-premier ministre.
Mr. Speaker, let me again bring some independent, nonpartisan facts to this conversation. It is the job of the ratings agencies to determine the fiscal sustainability of every country's fiscal position. And ratings agencies have reaffirmed Canada's AAA rating. And you know why they did that, Mr. Speaker? Because we have the lowest deficit in the G7. And because, Mr. Speaker, we have the lowest debt to GDP ratio in the G7. We believe in fiscal responsibility, Mr. Speaker, and the numbers show it.
L'honorable.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Nonpartisan voice that I'm interested in is the shipyard worker in Vancouver who told me that his mortgage payment has now risen to $7,500 a month. $7,500 a month for a shipyard worker and a middle-class family. That proves that this Prime Minister, after 8 years, is not worth the cost of mortgage payments. According to John Manley, Liberal Finance Minister, their deficits are driving up interest rates on the back of mortgage holders. Will she reverse these deficits so that we can bring down inflation and interest rates before the shipyard worker and millions of Canadians lose their homes?
L'honorable vice-premier ministre.
The Deputy Prime Minister.
Speaker, talk is cheap, but actions speak louder than words. If these conservatives actually believed in supporting Canadians during the housing crisis, they would be supporting Bill C-56. Right. This includes a critical measure lifting the GST on all new rental construction that will get more homes built faster. The Conservatives should actually act in the interests of Canadians and not continuing to parrot their talking points, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly.
Okay, let's take a break.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Interesting. I'm getting comments. Clarity. And I think I know why. So I want to address a couple of things. We got Roger Langille, if I'm pronouncing your name inappropriate or mispronouncing your name, my apologies. And Janet Berrigan Peter. You're both very concerned about what's going on in the Mideast. I can tell you this. The United States has 13 different intelligence agencies. The Israeli Mossad is considered one of the best in the world. So how did they not know this was coming? Do you get the feeling they wanted this, that somebody wanted this to happen? Because it's created another excuse for war. And that's all we ever seem to get these days is more war cries. The only thing the Liberals, the NDP, and the Conservatives ever agree on is that we have to back somebody who's in war. We're already knee-deep in debt over Ukraine. We do not need to get involved in the Mideast war. We need peace in the Mideast. That's what makes countries prosperous, peace. When countries are at war, the people suffer and the economy is left in ruins. So I'm agreeing with what I'm seeing here. Yes, there are some questions about why did this intelligence fail? Was it intentional? I wonder. Because you can't tell me they're that incompetent. And we need to be concerned about getting wrapped up in another war. Because we got to get out of Ukraine. We need peace in Ukraine, and we need peace in the Middle East. That's the only thing that works for everybody. You notice under Donald Trump, I pointed this out today, he moved the embassy, U.S. embassy, from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. A lot of people said there was going to be a huge pushback, outcry from Arab states. There wasn't, because Trump was encouraging peace negotiations amongst Israel and other Arab states. He was encouraging peace in the region, and everybody benefits from peace. It's good for the economy. It's good for individuals. Your taxes go up during war. Scarcity increases during war. Your infrastructure is destroyed during war, and you're left with nothing. But who benefits? Who benefits? The arms manufacturers, those munitions manufacturers who keep pushing out the weapons to kill people. And countries keep buying them because they have to be replaced. And they're gleeful over the second war. And we haven't even reached the apex of this yet. We're just getting there. But it's not going to get better unless we can insist on peace in this region. That is what we need. Thank you, by the way, for everybody who was in today. And listen to Freeland for a while if you can stand.
Shares her concern for the hostages, and we call for their immediate release.
Then I have Deputy Edmonton.
The honourable member for Edmonton Strathcona.
They're profoundly alarmed by what we are witnessing in Gaza. The UN has said that nearly half of Gaza's people have been forced to flee from their homes and that morgues are overflowing. This is a humanitarian crisis of extreme proportions. It took almost a week for the minister to start paying attention to the impact this war has had on Palestinians, even though thousands of people have been killed. Israelis and Palestinians have the right to live in peace. Why won't this government stand up for international law and call for a ceasefire?
Hear, hear. Then I have Vice Premier Minister.
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister.
Our government is very clear that we support the state of Israel, and we recognize Israel's right to defend itself within international law. As the Prime Minister has said, we are deeply concerned by the dire humanitarian situation in Gaza. International law must be respected, and Canada will continue to support civilians of Gaza facing urgent humanitarian needs. That's why we announced an initial commitment of $10 million in humanitarian assistance to trusted partners. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Calgary Forest Lawn.
Years of failed Liberal NDP policies, this finance minister experiences inflation much different than everyday Canadians. Her enormous inflationary deficits led to 40-year highs in inflation that caused the Bank of Interest rates to go up more than ever in history, and they're just not worth the cost. After promising to balance the budget, her own budgeting watchdog called her out, proving Liberal deficits could reach almost $50 billion this year. I guess budgets don't balance themselves after all. Can the finance minister tell Canadians how much he's adding to the federal debt this year, or are we asking for too much?
You're asking for too much, obviously.
Vice Premier Minister, Minister des Finances.
Mr. Speaker, our government will provide an update on the fiscal picture, both expenses and revenues, in the fall economic update in due course. But let me be clear, Mr. Speaker, because I do not want Canadians to be misled by alarmist partisan talking points from the opposition. The reality, Mr. Speaker, is that Canada's position is fiscally responsible. We have the lowest debt and deficit in the G7, and our AAA rating has been reaffirmed by our ratings agencies.
The Honourable Member for Calgary Forest Lawn.
The finance minister is known for speeding up just for the wrong reasons. By adding more debt than every government before them combined, she put the pedal to the metal on her deficits and revved up inflation. And unlike an Alberta highway, the consequences of her spending isn't just a speeding ticket. It's a bigger deficit, higher inflation that led to higher interest rates, putting Canada most at risk in the G7 for a mortgage default crisis. After 8 years, they're definitely not worth the cost. Is the finance minister going to blow through her budget deficit projections again by more than $6 billion? Yes or no?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Oh,
Mr. Speaker,
Mr. Speaker.
our government will provide an update on our fiscal position, on expenses, and on
All
revenues.
right, we've heard this.
in
This is the
fall
fifth time
economic
she said
update.
this. Fifth time she said this. You know, it is just, talking. She talks about talking points. That's all she can ever spout is talking points. Here she is. There she is, waving her little fingers again at people. Oh, why do people have to ask these horribly unnecessary questions? Don't they realize we have everything under control? She is the most irritating politician, next to Justin Trudeau, of course. And it is always irritating to listen to her, but always irritating. But I see a lot of you who were commenting today would agree with that. Bobby Bartlett, this witch should be run out of Canada with Trudeau. Well, I don't think she's going anywhere. She wants to be the next prime minister. There's no question about that. But you see the irony of this woman saying she stands up for Israel. She had a grandfather who was a Nazi propagandist, and she's been knee deep in this Ukrainian scandal with so many former members of the Waffen-SS coming to Canada. So this is all a facade. This is a charade. And I want to look at a comment here, which I found very interesting, from Robert Queens. Let me be clear. The Israel war is another diversion from all of the other corruption going on around the world. The Liberal government is just fulfilling the World Economic Forum agenda. You will own nothing and be happy if they let you live. Clearly, there is something going on here to distract our attention from what's important in Canada. Because as I said at the beginning, just when we had a coalescing of opposition to woke ideology, to gender ideology in the schools, to a lot of other issues, suddenly our attention is in the Mideast again. Suddenly we're looking at the Mideast, and this is distracting everything. You can take a stand in the Middle East, you can support Israel, and of course you can attack terrorism. But that doesn't mean you stop fighting for what's important in Canada, because that's what the Liberals want you to do, to forget how bad their government's been and to forget that you need to change things here in Canada, not in the Middle East. And that's what has to happen. We'll stand a bit more of her.
Again, I'd like to remind members that I'm quite well aware of the time that members have to ask and to answer questions. The honourable member from Simcoe North.
Mr. Speaker, while households are dealing with higher interest rates, taxpayers are now on a bigger hook. That's because interest on the debt is going up. The government projected just a few months ago that it'll spend $44 billion on debt servicing costs this year, but that assumed that interest rates would go down. Instead, interest rates have gone up. So will the Minister of Finance finally tell Canadians how much they're now on the hook for higher debt servicing costs because interest rates haven't come down?
Then I have Vice Premier Minister.
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, our government will state Canada's fiscal position, revenues, costs.
Doesn't the hand drive you
clearly in
crazy?
the fall economic statement in due course this fall. What the opposition clearly doesn't know or doesn't want to admit is that Canada's fiscal position is responsible, indeed is enviable compared to our peer countries. This was reaffirmed by the independent ratings agency, DBRS Morningstar, which recently reaffirmed.
Here's, you just have got to wonder how anybody can listen to herself repeat the same BS over and over again, and wave her little fingers at everybody because they're all morons but her. Oh, if everybody just had half of my intelligence, Freeland wishes so devoutly. Anyway.
Disaster. Can the Minister of Finance confirm that we're going to be paying $6 billion more in interest next year?
Then I have
the Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Our government will confirm budget numbers in the fall economic update. However, today, I want to highlight a very important reality, a reality that should be reassuring for all Canadians. Canada's fiscal outlook is very strong. Our deficit and GDP ratio is the lowest of all G7 countries, and our AAA credit rating was reconfirmed by credit rating agencies.
Right. Didn't we just hear that? I swore we just heard her say the same thing. All right, this is a great comment here from Janet Berrigan Peter. Can they get rid of her damn hand and give her Elmer Fudd's voice? That's, I think everybody hates that hand. It's constantly waving at people like they're idiots. Yeah. All right. Here she goes again.
The Honourable Minister of Housing.
Speaker, I thank the honourable member for the question, but it's confusing to me that he would pose such a question when he has a plan that's actually going to increase the cost of building homes and increase the cost of Canadians for living in them. His plan literally is to add taxes to home building in this country and to cut funding that's going to build more homes for Canadians. Mr. Speaker, over the course of our time in this House over the last number of years, we have repeatedly put measures on the floor that are going to help improve the affordability of housing in this country. Time and time again, that member has voted against them. Thank you so much.
The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. Mr. Speaker, if Canada were part of the group formed by the United States to face the crisis between Israel and Gaza, Canada would be participating in decisions and have information firsthand. Is the government, or can the Deputy Prime Minister tell us as of today, if humanitarian pathways will be opened into Gaza and opened for civilians towards Egypt? The Honourable Minister of International Development.
I just want to assure the Honourable Member that Canada was the first Western country to actually announce humanitarian assistance to civilians in Israel and Gaza. Not only that, by announcing it so early and so quickly, we've actually incentivized other partners to move forward. We're working with partners in the region and our trusted international organizations to ensure that we have access to civilians both in Gaza and Israel. We're working diligently, and as events move forward, we'll continue to insist on international humanitarian access to civilians in Gaza.
The Honourable Member for Lac-Saint-Jean. Mr. Speaker, the Bloc Québécois firmly condemns the terrorist attacks by Hamas, and I reiterate that Israel has the right to defend itself. However, Hamas must be distinguished from all Gazans and the Palestinian people. Last Tuesday, the UN called for a humanitarian corridor to Gaza for medical reasons. This is the basis of Article 3 of the Geneva Declaration of the Protection of Civilians, saying that the wounded and sick shall be collected and cared for. What is Canada doing in real terms to ensure that Israel does just that?
The Honourable Minister for International Cooperation.
Speaker, we are continuing with our long-standing position that in conflict areas, humanitarian access must be provided to civilians to ensure that there is access to life-saving food, medicine.
Well, Remember this guy as the immigration minister, letting in tens of thousands every week through the border in Quebec and New York. Do you remember this guy? They just keep recycling them. It's just amazing. And of course, they got the open borders minister leading national defense now, which is absolutely outrageous. I got a great comment to read here from Ruth Gauthier, talking about, no doubt, our Deputy Prime Minister, Chrystia Freeland, with the grandfather who was a Nazi. Yep. Is it her hand waving stops her head from bobbing? Well, that's probably true. And somebody, Kim Pat says, stop, hold the line. Very good point. I don't know if you're making this point or not, but I'm sure you are. Is that while we're distracted by all of this, we're forgetting that 2 people are on trial for protesting Trudeau's policies, his COVID mandates. 2 people are on trial, and they're getting a horrible bashing from residents of Ottawa who can't even substantiate whether or not their so-called monetary losses had anything to do with the convoy being in town. They don't even address the fact. They don't even address the fact that they had lockdowns in Ottawa and throughout the province during this whole period. Did that affect their monetary bottom line? Would that have something to do with losing money? No, they blame it all on, 2.5, 3 weeks of the convoy? And these people outside the door, they had to be convoy people. Absolute nonsense. And this is the kind of trial Tamara Leach and Chris Barber are getting. This is the kind of trial. It's a show trial. But, fortunately, I think there's an honest judge there, and I don't think it's going to work. I don't think this is going to work for the prosecution. But while this is all going on, in the Mideast, we're forgetting about that, and we can't. Anyway, let's get back to the percent.
Mr. Speaker, I think it's fair to ask a question.
I'm going to try to fly again.
When they talk about the inflationary spending, are they talking about the programs that they're actually going to cut that are supporting people right now? Let's look at the measures that they're going to cut that they already voted against. Mr. Speaker, the question was about homelessness. When we put $1.3 billion on the table, they voted against it. Are they going to cut supports for the homeless? When we're talking about removing the GST so we can build more homes for middle-class families in this country, they intend to vote against it. Are they going to cut that too?
It's a clown
Mr. Speaker, when we put money on the table for affordable housing, time and time they vote against it. Are they going to cut that too? They are reckless. They are not worth the risk. We are here to support the middle class.
We're here.
The honourable member for Kelowna Lake Country.
Government that declared victory on inflation only to see it skyrocket.
That's right.
James from Langley, BC told Global News that he and his husband are selling his home as a result of their mortgage payments and returning to the rental market. Mortgage defaults are climbing, with forced sales events up 10%, as just reported by the Toronto Real Estate Board. After 8 years with this NDP Liberal government, people are being forced to sell their homes. This Prime Minister is just not worth the cost.
Right.
Will the Prime Minister finally stop his inflationary spending so Canadians can keep a roof over their head?
The Honourable Minister of Housing.
Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to share with my honourable colleague that I recently had a chance to sit down with the mayor of the Township of Langley to discuss their application of the Housing Accelerator Fund, which this member and her party is promising to get rid of. We want to be there for the cities to help the very kind of people that she's asking about her in her question.
She does look like an
promises to cut the support out from under should they form government. Mr. Speaker, if the honourable member is serious about building houses in this country, I would invite her to support Bill C-56, which is going to remove the tax on the construction of new homes, and I can't understand why they oppose it.
The Honourable Member for Louis Saint Laurent.
All right. It's none of you who are watching today are being distracted. I can see that. And that's why new media, alternative media, independent media is doing so well and is so successful. Because the mainstream media is distracted. That's all they want to talk about. That's all they want to talk about is Ukraine, and now it's the Mideast. They don't want to talk about the real issues here in Canada, about how we are rapidly becoming an authoritarian dictatorship, how we're losing our basic freedoms. We are losing our freedom of speech incrementally. There's more coming in the fall. And we are losing our freedom to assemble. And that's what this trial is all about. You think you can take on this government with a protest? Think again. We'll put you on trial and we'll try to ruin your lives. I know both of these individuals extremely well. They have gone through hell for telling people to have a peaceful protest. And we're not supposed to think about that now. Here she is again. Oh,
help us with the housing crisis.
yeah.
They need to support
she's getting her
our
hair a little
legislation.
tousled today.
C-56.
Waving
the
things
reality.
around so much. Oh,
L'honorable
look,
député
see
de
that look of
Vancouver,
contempt in her face.
Millions
She
of
puts the
Canadians
earpiece
are
back
going
in.
without their prescription medications because they can't afford them. Thousands die as a result. Universal public pharmacare will cover everyone and save us billions of dollars. This weekend, NDP members sent a clear message to deliver it. Now, the Liberals themselves promised public pharmacare 26 years ago, and their own convention delegates voted for it in 2016, 2018, and 2021. Will the Liberals keep their word and finally deliver the public pharmacare that Canadians need and want? Yes.
Tough word from the NDP.
Ministre de la Santé.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I have enormous regard for my colleague. I know his commitment and
Yes,
passion
they're all in bed
to
together.
help reduce costs for Canadians is there. He would know, therefore, that the work that we've taken jointly with provinces and territories on bulk purchasing to see $3.5 billion in saving by working together to reduce costs for Canadians has happened. He knows that we've taken critical action on diseases, rare diseases and drugs for rare diseases. He knows that we've taken critical action on patented
Critical
drugs.
action.
And yes,
Critical,
we are having
critical,
a discussion on Pharmacare legislation. I look forward to a continued productive conversation as we look at all of the health cares and priorities in keeping Canadians safe and healthy.
Oh, Mark Holland, what a piece of baggage.
L'honorable député de Rosemont.
The honourable member for Rosemont-la-Petite-Patrie. Mr. Speaker,
Oh, good
it
God.
won't just save lives.
There's another guy can't be bothered coming to work with his. How can you take anything the NDP says with anything but a grain of salt? How can you take them seriously when they're propping up this Trudeau government? They look the other way over China, election interference issue. They look the other way over censorship. They look the other way of the imposition of the Emergencies Act. A lot of them didn't agree with that. You could see it in their faces, but they supported it anyway because it's just a little bit of power for them, even though they're not even in a formal coalition. But they're propping up the government. Trudeau's getting the benefit of it. The NDP are really getting nothing out of this except disgrace, and which is what they deserve to get.
Bringing down costs for almost $3.5 billion by buying medications together with the provinces and territories, by pooling our purchasing, and by working with our partners to find a way forward. And certainly we are working with all members here in the House to bring down the cost of medications.
L'honorable député de Hamilton East, Stony Creek.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. While the leader of the opposition continues to blame municipal mayors and councillors for our
Well,
housing
here's a
challenges,
softball question.
we've decided to work in collaboration with other levels
These are
of
just
government,
so bloody
including our
embarrassing to
municipal
watch.
partners. Our housing programs, including the Housing Accelerator Fund, incentivizes municipalities,
No,
nonprofits,
I can't stand
and
it.
private sector
I
to
can't
build
stand
more
softball
affordable homes.
questions. Anyway, we have a comment here from Kathy Landon. Chrystia Freeland is in fact a neo-Nazi sympathizer. Well, I don't know if she is or not. I wonder. She had a grandfather who was a Nazi sympathizer. And my God, she's had connections over the years. She worked for a paper. She started out as a journalist for a paper that had neo-Nazi sympathies and it supported the 14th Waffen-SS Grenadier Division. So she's highly suspect. And she lies about those connections over the years. And she goes to Ukraine and marches with neo-Nazis today and then says, oh, she had no idea. So I think there's some veracity to what you say, Kathy. And we have a question here from Jay. I don't have the rest of the How low will Trudeau's poll numbers go before the Liberal Party finally forces him out? I'll answer that in a sec.
Receiving this message. Don't believe me? Take a look at the headlines. Average rent went up another 11% in past year, and even getting a roommate doesn't help much. Canada's rental crisis is getting worse, according to a new report that found that the average asking price for rent in September was $2,149, up by more than 11% more than a year ago. Enough. When will he stop his inflationary spending so Canadians can actually afford housing?
All right, we're going to get the same answer here. All right, the answer. How low does it have to go? It can go down to 20s. And Trudeau will cling to power for the next year in the mistaken belief that it's going to go back up to 45. Now, I don't think he can cling to power beyond a year. He's got 2 years before his mandate expires. He will cling to that for as long as possible. And because the only one waiting in the wings is Chrystia Freeland, who is just as polarizing and despised in some quarters of the Liberal Party as Justin Trudeau. The party will give him the benefit of the doubt for as long as possible. But we need to get rid of him before then. We really do. Because his agenda is so damaging, so dangerous, that it is destroying this country. And the censorship legislation that's coming is going to be the worst in the world for a democratic nation, if we can still call ourselves a democratic nation.
A home. This is from Vicky, my single 30-plus daughter and 2 grandkids just moved in because she could no longer afford her $2,500 plus rent. She had to give up her job to move back into town with me. So I'm basically supporting all 3. So yeah, when will they learn how to manage money, decide about monetary policy, and actually build homes, not bureaucracy?
Mr. Speaker, I assure you I am not making this up. She's talking about a lack of affordable housing in her community. We are literally discussing an affordable housing project funded by our government in Peterborough, and she voted against that particular policy. Mr. Speaker, she says she's going to continue to vote against these kinds of policies that are literally putting a roof over the head of some of her constituents, most vulnerable constituents in her community. Mr. Speaker, the honourable member has an opportunity to get more homes built in her community. She can support Bill C-50.
Does he really believe that this policy is actually already building literal roofs over people's heads? Are these people that stupid? Yes, they are.
And forced home sales are on the rise. People are losing their homes. This Prime Minister is just not worth the cost. Will the Prime Minister finally put an end to his inflationary spending so that Canadians can keep a roof over their head?
What do you think the answer is going to be? Not this housing minister who keeps trying to fly. No, Christy is back.
Let me share.
Still waving that hand at us.
Canada has the lowest debt to GDP ratio and the lowest.
Let me be clear.
G7. That is a fact. Canada has a AAA rating. That is also a fact. And you know what else is a fact, Mr. Speaker? The opposition, which claims to care about the housing challenges Canadians face, is blocking Bill C-56, which experts across the country say is essential to get more rental homes built. That is sheer, utter hypocrisy, Mr. Speaker.
Yeah.
The honourable member for Montmagny-Lillet, Kamouraska, Rivière-du-Loup. Mr. Speaker, this government's policies have forced the Bank of Canada to raise interest rates 10 times, and the impact is devastating. The latest example, 20% of mortgages with the big banks are now in negative amortization. This means the monthly payment doesn't cover the interest, so the amount owing keeps going up. It's a loan that never ends. When will the Liberals put an end to their inflationary deficits so that rates can come down and Canadians can stay in their homes?
The
Honourable Minister. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to thank my colleague for his question. I'm looking forward to the day where the Conservative Party opposite will finally vote in favor of things that will do precisely what people need to help keep the roofs over their heads. And I hope, Mr. Speaker, that they will vote in favor of what the construction professionals and the municipality, the Federation of Municipalities have said. They're delighted that we've cut the GST on the construction of new homes.
They're delighted. And they're going to pass that on to consumers.
The Honourable Member for Rivière-des-Mille-Îles. Mr. Speaker, based on an online consultation, the federal government has tossed out the Quebec winners of a competition.
Oh, no. Oh, no. Yeah. Yes, there's some terrible anti-Quebec bias with the Trudeau government. It's awful. I mean, all these people, they function in the real world or not? No. That's... Yeah, I see Sean Reed says Clown World. Yes, yes. You know, we watch this because it's hard to believe. It's like watching a train wreck, isn't it? It's hard to believe it's going to happen. But it's fascinating at the same time. These people are so bloody inept, and they're such liars, and they keep repeating things that we all know are just factually ridiculous. Yet they keep repeating the same lines over and over and over again. I mean, Freeland must have had the same paragraph in front of her on 12 occasions today, and she kept repeating the same thing. It doesn't matter if it's true, but it's all talking points. Sometimes it's bad from the opposition as the government, but this is the way government and governance has deteriorated, and it is just embarrassing to watch. But this is what Canada has become, and in the process, Trudeau has made this an authoritarian nation where Parliament really doesn't even matter anymore. Oh, yeah.
Listen to Justice Arbour.
You can only go so far and try to get back out. Yeah, well, I don't think it's ever happened, actually.
The Honourable Minister of Veterans. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And again, I'd like to thank my colleague for his question, and I look forward to working with him on the Veterans Affairs Committee. All members here recognize the importance of our veterans, and that's why we conducted the poll. And the vast majority of respondents.
Okay, I got a comment here. Yeah, the Trudeau government really recognizes the importance of veterans. That's why it invites. I've often asked that veteran to come to Parliament to get a standing ovation, 2 standing ovations. That's how much they respect veterans. Those are the kinds of veterans they respect, though. Ex-Nazis. Those are the veterans this Liberal government respects. They have no respect for Canadian veterans who fought for this country. They think we were fighting the Russians in the Second World War. That's how stupid this government is.
Not commit to meet the Liberals' lower food prices by Thanksgiving. Now, as a result, many Canadians can't afford to feed their families, a quarter are skipping meals, and millions of Canadians had to rely on food banks for their Thanksgiving dinner. This Prime Minister is not worth the cost. Will the Prime Minister end his inflationary spending so Canadians can afford to feed their families?
Well, that's a very simple answer. No, it won't.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, while the Conservative leader was
having
a self-aggrandizing, goodwill hunting delusion in an apple orchard,
can't even get his price
our
straight.
government was focused on stabilizing food prices for middle-class
I guess Freeland must have left the room.
By calling on the 5 grocery chain CEOs to produce action plans that would make a difference for Canadians. Our government is now tracking and monitoring and holding the grocery chains
That's what I just said. You can't even get his ties
while the
straight.
Conservatives talk turkey, we'll talk results for Canadians.
Colleagues, I saw that the member from Foothills had difficulty hearing the answer to the question that he had asked. I asked that we try to keep it down. And to all members, I ask that they please use comment which will not cause disturbance in the House.
Oh,
The
yeah.
honourable member from Foothills.
Broken Liberal promises and broken Liberals making light of the food crisis does not put food on the table. Many Canadians are starving because of the Liberals' broken promise to lower food prices by Thanksgiving. That is not what happened. Food prices are up 7% over last year. Now, the Prime Minister promised to lower food prices by Thanksgiving dinner. He failed. Another broken promise. So will the Prime Minister promise to lower his out-of-control spending so Canadians can afford a Christmas dinner, or will that be another promise broken?
Uh-oh. Kind of noisy. That won't make Mr. Fergus very happy.
Colleagues, we were doing so well on a day that was on a very sensitive issue internationally. I ask you to please continue with your good behavior for the day, and I ask in particular the member from Grand Prairie, please to
good behavior.
keep the comments to the time that he is
They're
asking
getting
questions.
a good behavior award today.
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And on this side of the House, we continue to do the hard work to ensure
there's
that
another
Canadian
non-entity.
families are supported.
The hard
Just look
work.
to our investment to create a nationwide system of early learning and
None of these
childcare.
people knows what
Or
hard
look
work
to
is.
our Canada Child Benefit. On this side of the House, we are making investments to make sure that families can buy the food, can get the school supplies and the sneakers that their kids need. Thank you, Mr.
A
Speaker.
little late for the school supplies, kids.
The honourable member from Dufferin Caledon.
Dufferin, yeah, that's it.
Well, Mr. Speaker, they must have a very different definition of hard work than Conservatives have, because after 8 years of this Liberal government, we know that food prices are out of control.
That's right.
I went to the grocery store in Orangeville this past weekend for Thanksgiving. A loaf of Wonder Bread was $4.40. That's the definition of Liberal hard work. And how do we get there, Mr. Speaker? Massive inflationary deficits, a carbon tax that's driving up the cost of everything.
Right.
The fake photo ops of the Prime Minister isn't going to fix anything. Will they cut the carbon tax, balance the budget so Canadians can pay for food?
Let's just see who's going to answer this one.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Oh, no.
Mr. Speaker, our government is fighting for
Freeland's
Canadians on
definitely left the house.
affordability every
Yeah.
step of the way. We're fully seized
And nobody's
with addressing
told this
the
guy
affordability
yet to
challenges that
rearrange his
Canadians are
tie.
facing by calling in the top 5 grocery CEOs to work with us to stabilize food prices. Conservatives can call this a photo op. I think calling decisive action for Canadians on affordability a photo op says more about them than it does about us, Mr. Speaker. Regardless of the Conservative.
All right. Do you notice how all you've got to do to validate how bad inflation is go to the grocery store? And yet they keep telling us it's not a big deal. It's not a problem. It's your imagination. We are living in 1984, folks. If you haven't had a chance to listen to my audiobook on Substack, please do listen to it if you want to read it, or read the book. Everything in there has become reality, and things that didn't quite fly off the page when you read them 20 years ago, 10 years ago, will today, because that's how we're living. The government is rewriting history on a daily basis, lying to us about the price of food.
Economic development for the regions of Quebec. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My colleague is right. Our government has been supporting women-led and particularly Indigenous-led businesses. We announced funding of $100,000 for a company in Gatineau. It was founded by two brilliant women, Krisha and Melanie, and they celebrate the diversity and richness of Indigenous cultures. We celebrate their success, and we're there to support them. Happy Small Business Week.
Funniest thing. All right.
The honourable member for Edmonton Millwoods.
Well,
Prime Minister's gatekeeping, anti-pipeline,
listen to Tim.
anti-resource development
I got another
policies,
comment to make.
hundreds of billions
Thank
of
you, Harry,
dollars of
for
project
Harry
investments have
Tate
fled
for that
Canada
comment.
and taking countless powerful paychecks away from Canadian workers. These Liberals just aren't worth the cost. Conservatives warned the Liberals that their plans to steamroll provinces by giving themselves unprecedented powers over provincial infrastructure, industry, natural resources through their No More Pipelines bill, Bill C-69, was unconstitutional. Will they repeal Bill C-69 now that the Supreme Court has ruled it unconstitutional? Yes or no?
L'honorable ministre de l'Environnement et des Changements climatiques.
I would like to correct my colleague and the fact that
There he
the Supreme
is.
Court last week issued an opinion. It was not a decision.
Mr. Moron
Let me-
himself,
let me
Steve
get
Van Gilbo.
If the members want a briefing by the Justice Department on the difference, we would be happy to.
Mr.
provide that
Greenpeace
to them, Mr.
activist
Speaker.
comes to Ottawa.
Let me quote from the Supreme Court
me quote.
on what they said. This appeal is not whether Parliament can enact legislation to protect the environment. It is clear that Parliament can do so under the heads of power assigned to it under the Constitution Act of 1867. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Exactly. Exactly. Well, I got two comments here. He's having trouble, eh? Oh, let's just one more here. One more.
Conflicts of interest, nepotism, abuse of power, and now we have allegations of criminality around the contracting practices in the top offices of
Exactly.
this government.
Why isn't
The
anybody has
$54
mentioned it
million
so far?
price tag for the Arrive scam app
The
is
hell is
just
wrong
the
with the
tip of the
Conservatives?
iceberg.
They wait to the last
week,
bloody
the
question.
NDP Liberal Coalition voted to shut down the testimony of the Auditor General's review of this scandal. Why?
Arrive Can is a scandal. The latest.
Mr. Speaker, my honorable colleague knows very well that committees make their own decisions in terms of the work they want to do. What we have said, Mr. Speaker, is that at all times we expect people
Dominic
to comply
Legault.
with the
There he is.
contracting policies of the Government of Canada. And those that decide to do something that is worthy of a criminal investigation will obviously be investigated by the appropriate authorities. Absolutely. And we don't comment on investigations that the RCMP might decide to do on any of these issues.
Yeah, okay. Greg doesn't know what the hell he's doing, does he?
The honourable member for Mégantic-L'Érable. Mr. Speaker, after 8 years of Liberal management, it's scandal upon scandal. We've just learned the RCMP has opened a criminal investigation into ArriveCan, which
Okay.
cost
At
Canadians
the-
$54
at
million
very
for
aggressive
nothing.
period we hear
It
about
was
it.
a Montreal firm, Bottler, who sounded the alarm. For one contract, a senior Liberal government official strongly recommended that Bottler work with the same ArriveCan firm, GC Strategies, a two-person firm with no office and no computer expertise. Bottler identified what looks an awful lot like an organized system of collusion. After 8 years of turning a blind eye, will the Liberals tell us who's getting richer at our expense when it comes to awarding contracts?
Wayne?
Who are they gonna haul up for this one?
The Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, as I've said repeatedly, we expect all those who work for the Government of Canada to follow the contracting rules, Treasury
of
Board
course
rules,
you
and
do.
other rules that apply.
Oh, boy.
In the case of these allegations, Mr. Speaker, there could be some criminal activity, and we expect the appropriate authorities to investigate, and that's precisely what this government will allow them to do.
L'honorable député de Scarborough Centre.
Speaker, in communities across Canada and in my riding of Scarborough Centre, many Canadians are finding it difficult to find an affordable
Softball?
place to call home. Rather than
Yeah,
scapegoating
it's a
newcomers,
softball. Let's just ignore that one. Couple of comments here. Harry Taint, thank you very much for this one. Referring to the parliamentary secretary, to Chrystia Freeland, Tommy Hunter show singer. Nice 70s suit. Yeah. It's probably, maybe he hasn't bought a suit in 50 years. I don't know. But Ruth Gauthier, question: do any of them even realize how much Canadians are going to suffer this winter? Now, does Mr. Guilbeault, the Minister for the Environment and Climate Change, does he realize he doesn't care how much Canadians are going to suffer? He's already said he's going to shut off the gas. He's going to shut off the pumps because that's what it means to fight climate change and to get rid of your fossil fuels. This is what you have to do. And if people suffer, it doesn't matter because it's for the greater good of the ideology of fighting climate change. And that's all he cares about. He is an idiot. He is so obsessed with the ideology of climate change that he doesn't care if people freeze, literally, or starve, literally, because it's more important to fight climate change. And of course, it's all a big charade because the carbon tax isn't doing anything to lower greenhouse gas emissions. Canada produces next to nothing of global greenhouse gas emissions. So even if we all lived in caves tomorrow, we would not be doing anything to cut global gas emissions. Oh, Charlie Angus is an ass.
What concrete steps will this government take to hold big oil
He's
to
just an
account
old
to
ass
protect
now.
Alberta jobs, Canadian communities, and our planet from the fires that are happening from the climate crisis?
That's the moron who said it was a good thing that a woman in Alberta died because she couldn't get an organ transplant because she wasn't vaccinated.
Honourable colleague for his
Moron.
question. In fact, our government
Moron.
have
Meet
taken
the
a
other
number
moron.
of measures to ensure that big oil companies do their fair share when it comes to fighting climate change. We're the first G7 countries to have eliminated fossil fuel subsidies 2 years ahead of schedule, something that the Conservative Party of Canada would never do. They want to make pollution free, Mr. Speaker. We've also implemented measures to reduce methane emission by at least 40% by 2025 and 75% by 2030, which will make it one of the most ambitious measures in the world to reduce methane emission from the oil and gas sector. We have many more things coming, including a cap.
Yes, including shutting off the pumps, shutting off the gas. Moron.
The honourable member for Richmond, Arthabaska. Mr. Speaker, after the Governor General's lavish spending on international travel, we've learned her office spent over $117,000 on dry cleaning since 2018, an average of $1,800 per month. For fun, I did some calculations based on the going rate for these services. At the rates she's been spending, that's an average of 3 outfits a day, 365 days a year. Why doesn't the government cut her $33 million budget? What are they waiting for? Because she's clearly incapable of managing taxpayers' money seriously and responsibly. The Honourable Minister of Canadian Heritage. Mr. Speaker, the Governor General has done important work for Canada. Obviously, we expect every dollar she spends to be done in a rigorous and conscientious way. Thank you.
Well, this brings to the end of question period.
All right,
I understand there's
shut
going to
you
be a
up,
number
Greg
of...
Couple comments. Pascal, the Heritage Minister, she's going to be the one introducing the next censorship bill, which is going to be called the Online Safety Bill, and it's going to make disinformation illegal. It's going to ban disinformation without actually even defining disinformation. Anyway, I want to thank you all for joining me today because this has been very good. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for being here today. And I tell you, the comments that came in were just fantastic. Yeah, Charlie Angus is a wackadoodle. Yeah, well, I said he was an old ass now, because when I first met him, he was a lot younger. But yeah, he's a wackadoodle. And anyone who thinks people should be dying because they don't get the COVID-19 vaccine is definitely a wackadoodle. And great comments. Thank you. Lock them all up, Stephen Corbo. Yes, well, that's not going to happen, but a lot of these people should be, really. It's always interesting. It's always fascinating to watch Question Period because you get no answers. And sometimes you don't really get questions either, but you'll never get any answers at a Question Period, especially from these liberals. But it's entertaining. It's very entertaining to watch. And thank you, Holly Green. Thank you for watching today. I'm going to keep doing this as much as possible because you need to hear how stupid your politicians are. And the question I have is, why did the Conservatives wait to the very end of Question Period to talk about ArriveCan? This is a huge scandal. And it's part of the whole COVID mandates disaster that we are still recovering from. But nothing. No. Anyway, hey, Harry Team, thanks for the show today, David. It makes me, well, I enjoy doing this as much as you enjoy participating. Keep participating. Keep sending your comments in. And you need to watch this. As painful as it can be, to watch these morons stand up there and talk nonsense, especially this environment minister who thinks it's okay for people to starve and to freeze as long as you're fighting climate change. You need to know that. But this guy is so obtuse. He is so divorced from reality that he actually says things like that in public because he believes them. That's what happens when you're a Greenpeace activist for all those years and you get arrested for doing stunts. He's still doing stunts, but now he's in cabinet. And that's the only difference. So, and thank you for all your kind words. And we will do this again tomorrow because we need to do that. So thank you again. I'm David Crayden for Stand on Guard. You're watching the Crayden's Right channel. And we're going to be doing some broadcasts this week on the war in the Mideast, on the war in Ukraine. Both of these wars have to stop. And we've got to focus on what's important for Canadians, for mothers and fathers and children in this country. We're going to be talking more about that on Stand on Guard this week. Thanks for being a part of this today. Bye for now.